Right. Welcome to our October Campus Leader Call. Really excited to have Debbie Chang here today. We are going to do a deep dive into ballot research parties because it is unfortunately too late to get people registered, but it is not too late to make sure that people are informed about their choices and being reminded that they should probably be looking at their ballots before they head to the polls. So Debbie, I turn it over to you. Yes, in some states you still can register. But I think in many of the states represented on this call, it is probably too late. Some states you can even register day of, I believe that's true. I think you can walk into your polling location, which is pretty great. All right, Debbie, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stephanie. Thanks, everybody in higher ed team. I'm so glad to be here. And I will share just a little bit about myself. Let's see. So, you know what? I did not do this planning very well. So, let's see. Am I able to slideshow? Oh, it's supposed to be a presenter mode. Take two. Presenter view. Do you see just the slides and not my notes, or do you see my notes too?
I see your notes as well. If you would like, I'd be happy to share the slides through my side so you can have your notes up.
How about now?
Now we just see your slides.
Fantastic. It works. Okay. Technology, hit it ground. So the climate climate super voters ballot research party, very exciting. I'm sure everybody here thinks that voting is important. I also think that voting is important, except I thought I was a good voter. I didn't realize that I wasn't a good voter. So let's talk about that. So I'm the group leader in the CCL Alabama Huntsville chapter, and I used to lead the group in Washington, D.C. I serve on the steering committee of the Climate and Environmental Justice Action Team, and I'm also part of the People of the Global Majority Caucus. So very happy to see all of you. I'm going to stop share for a minute to tell you my story. Um, so when I was in when I was joining CCL and learning how important voting was. And I heard Nathaniel Stinnett of the Environmental Voter Project speak. I think some of you have seen his speeches. Um, CCL's mission is to enable breakthroughs in personal and political power, right? And political power, one of that is voting. We had National Voter Registration Week a couple weeks ago, and I I would have said that I was a consistent voter because I voted for president, right? Most of the time. That's consistent. And it wasn't until EVP explained that, as far as a campaign is concerned, as far as elected officials are concerned, a reliable voter is one who votes for midterms and primaries and midterm primaries and local races, special elections, dog catcher. I was exactly the type of inconsistent environmental voter that he was talking about. And everyone had always told me that voting was important, but nobody had ever really explained why tangibly until Environmental Voter Project. So I was converted. Since then, I repeated those EVP talking points to anyone who will listen. I mentioned before the call started that I got an opportunity just Friday. Somebody at a Green Drinks networking site. He was telling me that he wasn't planning to vote in my very partisan state. His vote wouldn't make a difference. And honestly, for president in a partisan state, he's probably correct, right? The way our election system is set up, it simply isn't true to say that someone who lives in a state like California or Massachusetts or Alabama, that your vote is going to make a difference in the outcome for president. That's just basically true. Um, so most practical reason to go vote in November may not be to get a president elected. It's this: who you vote for is private, but whether or not you go to the polls is a matter of public record. So don't not show up. There's a great TED talk by Eric Liu. I think it's called There's No Such Thing as Not Voting. And what he's basically saying is that, sometimes people think voting's for suckers. Why should you vote? And he actually says not voting is voting. It's voting for everything that you may detest and oppose. It can be dressed up as an act of principled passive resistance, but in fact, Not voting is actively handing over your power to someone else whose interests are counter to your own, and to people who would very happily take advantage of your absence. So not voting is for suckers. When I knocked on doors in this past March, I was working in a small local election here in Alabama for a state representative. And there were many people who were very angry. They wanted to protest by not voting. And I told them, who you vote for is private, but whether or not you show up is public record. The election officials, they can't tell the difference between a protesting non-voter and an apathetic non-voter. So if you want to protest, go and turn in a blank ballot. Go and turn in write in your own name, write in your dog's name. I don't freaking care. Just show up. Every single time I vote, every single time you vote, we permanently yank our area's voting demographic a little closer to people like us, a little younger, a little more person of color, a little more environmental. Always, no matter what the outcome is of the election. So I've now worked and volunteered on several campaigns, and I worked as campaign staff, and I can see behind the scenes. I can look at your profiles and see when I talk to you, from your voter records. I can see your address, your phone number that you sign up for registration with, and I can see how often you vote. I know if you voted in the presidential election and the midterm primaries. And who do you think the campaign's going to prioritize? Do you think they're going to prioritize past me who sometimes voted? If they did, they weren't going to win. So they have to prioritize the votes of people who do vote. There was an article I read about a campaign manager for a small local election. And they had looked at their areas like demographics, college town maybe, or a young professionals, and their average age was 35 years old. And they were trying to figure out how they were going to communicate with their audience. And 35, social media, maybe they don't have landlines. Great, done. But that was their area demographics. Then they looked into their voter demographics. And the average age of voters in their area, 59. And suddenly their entire strategy had to change. Not only could they not prioritize using social media, they also couldn't prioritize doing families, right? They had to prioritize the issues of people who did show up at the polls, or they wouldn't be able to win. I've learned a lot about power in the last few years, and if you're like most human beings, you like to talk to people who you agree with, people who are like you. An elected official has to talk to everyone who agrees with them or not. That is, elected officials have to talk to everyone who votes. So if you and your voting bloc aren't a critical mass yet, then you don't have enough power to get your elected representatives in prioritizing issues like students, school loans, etc. One of the most fascinating things I've learned from research on voter turnout is that for people who are unlikely voters, sometimes appealing to their issues of interest isn't as effective as simply being in a community of voters. So today we're going to talk about being in that community of voters.
Can you say that again? Sometimes what?
Yeah. Sometimes appealing to somebody's issues isn't as effective as just being among people who vote. If everyone around you is not voting, we're just very hypersocial creatures. We're very hypersocial creatures, and we look around us to know what we should be doing. And if people around you aren't voting, it's very normal to not vote. If everyone around you is voting, it's a norm to vote. And so how do we create that normal culture of voting? And my solution to that is to have a voter ballot party. So let's talk about what that is like and how that works. So hosting a virtual BYOB or bring your own ballot party, if you're on campus, even better if you can do it in person. You and your family can talk through the choices on your ballots and make sure that you're all signing and sealing your ballots as required. For the people whose barrier to voting isn't the willingness and desire to vote, but logistics or time, like working out exactly how to walk through the voter registration process, or just making the time to read, review, and research the ballot. So I want to tell you guys that I happen to know a very active CCL leader who almost didn't vote in 2020, who almost didn't vote in 2018 after she had heard Nathaniel Stinnett speak and was convinced. And I almost didn't vote in 2016, you guys, and I was volunteering on the presidential election in a swing state. Do you think it's because I didn't think voting was important? No, I thought voting was important. I just didn't get around to it. And let me tell you specifically, 2020, I hadn't worked out the logistics in my new area of what it would take to vote absentee during COVID. In 2018, I had moved to a new state, and I didn't realize that I had missed registration deadlines, but I didn't realize we could do same-day registration at the polls. And the 2016, I had moved to a swing state to work on the presidential election, and I was planning to vote absentee in my original state. But I had missed the deadlines, or I had gotten sidetracked or whatever. And it wasn't until somebody told me that in my new state, I qualified as a resident. I was planning to stay for a while. And because I qualified for residence, I could also register same day and go vote the day before the actual election. So that's how late I waited. So talk to your people around you. Maybe they wanted to vote, they figured they missed the deadline, and there's something that they can do. So when you host your ballot research party, maybe think about after sample ballots are released, and if possible, still before your registration deadline. I also do want to acknowledge the people here who might be ineligible to vote for various reasons, whether it's for citizenship or criminal status. There is another way. This is another way that you can help environmentalists and people like you to vote this year. So you can ask ballots attendees to bring. You can make it festive by having decorations, maybe ask people to dress in a red, white, and blue theme. I actually had a ballot party on Monday with my union this past Monday, and we just had it at a pizza parlor. So bring food. Food is always a winner. Then ask them to bring their ballot and bring their phones, and make sure you have some Wi-Fi and maybe a screen so you can look at it all together. I think I missed something here. Yeah, voter guides, websites, make sure there's internet access, and you can maybe invite people to do potlucks. Okay. You can ask people to bring, here it is. This is the part. Sample ballots, voter guides, websites. So here's an official looking ballot. If you have the official ballot, that's great. Otherwise, make it great. Print at least one or two, because sometimes it's a real pain to look at your teeny tiny ballots on your phone. Maybe they want to bring their laptops instead, or you can have it, like I said, displayed on a screen. Okay. Do set some norms. If you're doing it with CCL, remind people that CCL do welcome people across the political spectrum, and make sure to respect the different political ideologies in the room. If your chapter wants to discuss candidates, you can also invite attendees beforehand to research a specific office or ballot measure and to lead the discussion on what they found. If you're the host, try to make sure everyone gets to participate and nobody is dominating the conversation. You can also take notes. I should share with you the notes that I have for my area. In one event, and in the current one, we made a shared Google Doc where we threw in all the voter registration details, all the candidate websites, external voter guides for our district, and some endorsements. We also included how do you find your city district or your county commission district or your state's representative or your public service commission. There was a lot of things here, and they were all different numbers, and it was I have opinions, let me tell you. And then you can share those resources afterwards to the rest of the chapter who didn't attend. The document that I have actually has a bit.ly short link on it and a QR code, so I can share it around with folks very easily. Right. And so I think I want to share a couple of resources. Let me go ahead and show you where some of those resources are first. I should actually let me just share this whole slide deck if anybody wants to help me with notes, but also that I'm going to post. And I'm not watching the chats, I'm sorry. Feel free to interrupt me with questions, or ballots and bagels and bananas. I love that. But if you want to interrupt me or else just save the questions for later, but do keep populating them as you think of them, because otherwise it's hard to remember what they all are. So here are my favorite websites and planning toolkits. And one is brand new. I just saw it in my emails last week. Oh, and this one that's specifically for students. It's not for ballot research parties, but it is a great website. Maybe some of them are resources for you. But this party toolkit, this party toolkit, when we all vote party host, I'm going to go to that right now because I found it this week and it's updated for 2024, which is not the case when I did this for the inclusion conference last week. Party of the polls. I actually, it's in the other room. They give they gave the first 100 people, so I signed up, some stickers and bumper stickers and postcards, but you can download the party host guide right here, and it looks like this. So host guide, this is a toolkit that you can use, about us, overview, table of contents, guidance, promoting, planning, hosting. So basically a lot of the things that we just said, but written down if you prefer to read and do a checklist rather than the way we did it. So planning your events, scheduling, order your party pack. So this is a party pack that you might get if you do it fast enough. And I just sent a link to the Elections Council at Citizens Climate Lobby that you can forward. And that's how you can maybe get your own party planning toolkit. More of these, so on and so forth. Great toolkits, how to plan a party. So then, share, and then I was showing you the party of the polls toolkit, right? I really hope so. Let's see. Okay. Here we go. Actually, no, I was going to stop my share for a minute, and then I was going to tell you some more stories. So going back, so no, that was the part I was going to have. I'm going to take a deep breath. I just did a podcast the other day, and it was great because we could like stop, and we were going to we're going to edit this out, but this is live. You guys are real people, so I can't edit this part out. But it's all good. You're all friends. I am actually ready to go on. So go on and next. So these are the party toolkits. This one is also great. Make a plan to vote. National Voter Education Week, if you go to their partners overview page, there's a toolkit on how to make a plan. There's a toolkit on how to look at your ballot. They have sample texts, sample emails, sample language for your party, sample language for like reaching out to your family and friends. And let me just tell you guys, I'm really lazy. I don't want to do all the work myself. And frankly, I now know what's on my ballot because I had people come together and help me look at the ballot and tell me what to do. And I think a lot of people, we're just all busy, right? We're all busy. We don't have time to look at a long ballot together by ourselves. And that's why it's helpful to do it together in a group. And it's more fun. All right. If you've got your promotion and you've got your people and you've got everything, what do you do next? What do you do now that you've got, actually here, I will pause now before we go on to how we hold the actual party. Any questions about the setup of the party and promoting the party and that sort of thing? And then we'll go into what goes inside of the party.
This might be a question for like after, but before in our previous call, Stephanie, with Stephanie, we did a little like research session, like where we did research ourselves, and I used third-party websites to look at my ballot, but there were like two other things on my mail-in ballot that were not on like either of the sites that I checked. So yeah, I guess maybe I should have looked at like a more official source. Should I have like looked at like search for my county? But then like, if that's the case, then like there isn't really a central place that I can direct people to. Like I would have to tell people, look at, search up on Google something county voting, right?
Yeah, voting is really complicated. That is possibly the case, and that is something, especially if it's your like first few times voting, it's going to be extra complicated. Or if you've moved, it's still complicated, and that's one of the reasons I almost didn't vote a few times. And that's also one of the reasons it's really nice to be in a group, especially if you have like a mixed group of like people who have been around a while and people who are new. That's super extra helpful. I made sure, so last March when I held a voting party for the primaries, we were all transplants and we were all a little bit blind leading the blind and like, what do we do right now? And this time I made sure to get some people who had like been in Huntsville for a longer amount of time. And I think if you are the leader, it's probably a good idea to check with folks beforehand who are older or check with your advisor and see like at least have a starting place for all of your issues and ballots and a place to start researching. Um, when all else fails, you can Google things, and especially for like statewide ballot measures, that usually comes up and it's in the news. If you're going down to like your smaller candidates for city council or commission district, that's going to be harder. Or like judges, that's going to be harder, especially if they're in a state where none of those races are contested. Don't ask me how I know this. Um, so sometimes if Google doesn't work, Facebook might work. And so just search for them on Facebook. I actually had some success for a municipal election by searching for like Huntsville city municipal election forum. And like the League of Women Voters and the United Women of Color and the school board PTA had posted like forums with the candidates. So that's a starting point. There's no centralized place, which is why I made a Google document for my specific area. And I also put in disclaimers like you may not live here. This is where you go for more widespread news. Great question. Any other questions? And we'll dive into that when we talk about like how to research your ballot.
Thank you.
Yeah. Were there any questions above that I missed? All right, let's jump in. If you think of more, throw them in the chat. Okay, let's see. We are here. All right, so where do you find your voting information? So first of all, let's talk about just voting. If we're trying to help people vote and register and etc., where do we find that information? The best place sometimes is your state and local elections office's website, their social media, and their phone number. I don't know how many of you have volunteered with Environmental Voter Project. They always have like a clerk's number at the very, very bottom of the script of their local county clerk, because your county clerk is often the person who decides on the voting in your specific county if it's different than the next county over, which depending on your state, may be the case. Their website, their social, when I lived in Washington, D.C., their Twitter was very active in answering questions. If you want someone to hold your hand, and the website, the social media, and the phone number, sometimes they're not the most forthcoming. You can call 866-OUR-VOTE, election protection. They have extra language options. They have Ve y Vota for Spanish. They have Arabic. There's Asian hotlines, Asian language hotlines. I have volunteered myself for the Mandarin hotline. They are staffed with trained volunteers, often volunteer like actual lawyers or law students, and they will look up your answers for you. They can answer things like, where is my polling location? Am I registered to vote? Can I vote if I have committed a felony? Answer, almost always, it depends. It depends on you, where you live, your state, what day of it is. Sometimes it depends on what election it is. So 866-OUR-VOTE can help walk you through the specific areas where you are. If you want to talk about ballot information itself, Ballotpedia is a really great nonpartisan website. Vote 411 is a website by the League of Women Voters, and you can do those research as well. I volunteered in a California chapter of the, and you also have local groups that made it endorse. So like I said, the League of Women Voters, the ACLU, your local newspaper, and also since we're environmentalists, the League of Conservation Voters and your Sierra Club might endorse. I volunteered in a political committee for a Sierra Club in California. We got to interview our local city candidates, city council candidates. It was the first time in my life I realized how much local races affected my own day-to-day life, because I was like, well, this doesn't affect me. And it's like, no, it matters to like housing and city and streets and all of these like daily environmental things, as well as like social justice things I cared about. As far as endorsements, I once saw my sister's friend group, maybe like 5 or 10 years ago. They had a whole spreadsheet of endorsements from different local groups of like who said yes and no for different groups. It was the most brilliant thing I've ever seen. It was color coded and stuff. So any spreadsheet nerds in the audience, it's a fun project to take on. And it's really helpful to see the nuances of like how the different groups differed from each other. And I would suggest you have like all of the like places that you can find, even places that don't agree with you. Sometimes that actually helps. It's like, oh, well, I don't agree with this group. If they want this, I'm skeptical of that, or I want to find out more information about it. Oh, sorry, I actually skipped Ballotpedia. Ballotpedia is a really great resource. If you go to Ballotpedia, they can find you a sample ballot. They'll ask you for your address to make sure that you don't get the ballot for the next city over, or maybe even the next neighborhood over, because that might have a different like county commission district, for example. So they're generally good down to the state level and sometimes down good to the municipal level. They often have candidate websites and social medias on there, and sometimes a questionnaire that candidates can fill out. They usually do have information on what statewide ballot measures are being voted on your states, and often links to more information on who has said what. To get down to the municipal level, like June said earlier, sometimes it gets a little trickier. I've just found, I think 411 sometimes will go down to the municipal level a little bit better, but municipal level depends a lot on who's interested and who's willing to put in that volunteer work to do that. Okay. So then the bonus is once you've like done all of this research, you can share all of your information with your friends who want to make good voting choices, but maybe don't have the time to do the research. And then even if like they are interested in a couple of races, having the rest of the information takes the pressure off. They can research those two that they really care about and be confident in their trust and friendship with you to do the shortcuts for them. And this is life, and life is easier when there's teamwork, right? All right. So one thing we can do is we can spend a few minutes if you guys want after this is over to go through this, but this is the ballot party time sheet that I took to all of my people. Basically, I wanted them to know, first, are you registered at your current address? 2, do you have a voting plan? How am I going to vote? Early, mail, election day? When can I vote? Where do I vote? And then 3, what's on my ballot this November? How many of you have finished step 1? How many of you have finished step 2? Put it in the chat which number you're at. If you are registered, do step 1. If you are registered and you have a plan to vote, that's step 2. If you've seen what's on your ballot, step 3. And then once you've done that, think about what other questions or barriers to voting you have. And then who else can you help answer the above questions? If you've done all that, what do you need to host your own voter party? Somebody's already voted. Fantastic. 2.5, 3. Excellent. Good job, you guys. Well done. All right. I love this. So, all right. So finally, I'm just going to come to this last page. This page is the election protection, as I mentioned before. Really fabulous website, all the different languages. Am I registered to vote? How do I vote by mail? Where's my polling place? When do the polls close? I did check with them last month. If you are in line when the polls close, if you're in line, you are eligible to vote in every state. So don't let them kick you out of line. That is every state. You can also text election protection or chat message them or Facebook them. So there's a lot of resources. And I'm going to leave you with my final pitch, which is, and you can share this with your friends. So if we and the people like us don't vote, then the elected officials, elected decision makers, they don't have the political capital, the political power to carry out our issues the way that we want them to. They end up prioritizing the issues of people who do consistently vote. Politicians only have as much power as we give them by voting for them. And we can only take away that power by voting and giving our vote and our political capital to somebody else. So we need to build that political capital by voting and making sure that we help the people around you vote. So see you at the polls, not just this November, but at every municipal election thereafter. What other questions do we have?
Thank you so much, Debbie. That was a really inspiring note to end on too. So thank you for that powerful reminder. Any more questions for Debbie before we wrap up for tonight? Or move on to the action sheet rather. Yeah.
So what do you say to people who are like politicians, like most of their power comes from companies and like corruption?
Yeah. You know who vote? People who work at companies. You know, if and the thing is, like, I'll tell you one more story. I'll tell you the story of the fellow who I convinced to vote last Friday. I had talked to him a month ago and he was not interested in voting. Last Friday I talked to him again, and he was an enthusiastic voter, right? And he had voted, and he voted for years, and he's become demoralized because we're here in Alabama, and what is he voting for? Like, no one's like prioritizing his issues or anything. And the fact is, like, there's two things I want to say. One is voting isn't a Valentine. You don't have to love your candidate. It's a chess move. Not only that, if there's no candidates that you like, what would it take to inspire the candidates you do want? You might not be able to affect the outcome of this election. That's just how our political system moves, and it's slow. But we had actually somebody come to Green Drinks who was a candidate, and he was a very unlikely candidate. He's probably not going to win. I don't know if he's got the ground game to win. But he told us about going to a candidate school. You can all go to candidate schools. There's great groups called Run for Something, She Should Run, Emily's List, Higher Heights. You should run for something. You're 18. You're eligible to run in most places. They'll tell you to candidate school, and they'll show you how to look up the voter registration rolls in your area. They'll show you what your win number is, which is the number of people who voted in the last similar election and how many you would need to win, half plus one. That's your win number. If you're a candidate and you saw that the people in your like target demographic who probably agree with you is like 20% compared to, you know, the people who did vote, would you want to run? Probably not. So the more we vote, the more they can see that voter demographics, you know, like, hey, if I was a 20-something-year-old and I saw that, like, you know, 80 20-something-year-olds and 18-year-olds voted, I would be like, yes, I could vote, I could run, and I could win. If you saw that like 5% of 18 to 25-year-olds voted, would you even bother? And so we're voting not necessarily for us now, but for the us of the future and for the ones we want to be. Like we're the cavalry we've been waiting for.
Thank you. I didn't know that. It's so informative. That's why
Yeah, I mean, like nobody ever told me like the logistics of why voting was important. Like it's important, it's important, it's important. It's like, no, this is like the tangible physical reasons, like strategical reasons why it's important to vote, the tactical stuff, and this is why it's important to vote.
So the two, I think, main points I'm taking away is that it's a public record, and so candidates can see demographically who voted who what are the biggest voting blocks that voted for them that they need to represent. And then two is that future candidates can see the demographics and decide whether it's even worth it or not.
Just yes, except they can't see who voted for them. They can't see who voted for them, but they can see like
Who's
the winning
voting?
candidates. Not the winning. Anyone can see like who voted for one candidate versus the other candidate, so they can see the percentage of people who voted for candidate A versus B, right? And they can also see how many people that is most of the time, the number of people. So if you can also like break it down by demographics, but you won't be able to see who the demographics voted for. You can tell sometimes extrapolate by exit polls, but you won't be able to see specifically like this 18-year-old voted for candidate A and this 20-year-old voted for candidate B. You can't see that. You can make some assumptions, but yeah. Who you vote for is private. Whether or not you show up at the polls is public record. That's the takeaway.
Debbie, I have one question for you, since these are, of course, our campus leaders. They have groups that they're organizing. Something that might be kind of unique to this group, as opposed to some of the other groups that you've worked with in the past, is that very frequently on college campuses, students may be registered back home and may not be planning to change and update their registration, and may not be legally required based on residency requirements in the state they're currently living in. How would you suggest handling a ballot research party where maybe people are not actually voting in the same district, or even in the same state?
That's a great
You
question.
have very dissimilar ballots.
Yeah, that is a great question. So you can see the inclusion conference where I did this. What we did was like, this is a time and space for you to come, bring your ballots from wherever and take the time to look, and we'll help each other. Some of us who have already looked at our ballots and made a plan, maybe we can help someone else. If you have questions about voting, definitely check with Election Protection, 866-OUR-VOTE. They can tell you the specifics of your like registering in your state. And other people can help you look things up. So that's what we actually did in the inclusion party. We just looked at everybody, like everyone just took some time, did their homework themselves to look at it. Because like otherwise I'd have to do it by myself sometime when I found the time to do it, which is never. Or like the night before the election at like 2 a.m. is honestly what I did for the primary parties with one other person. But like it's just nice to come, like everyone come together, bring your ballots from wherever and do it together. Definitely check the laws of the states and remember that every state has some probable differences. Don't assume that what is true of one state is true of a different state. 866-OUR-VOTE actually has a really great website too that you can kind of get the big picture of voting laws. It won't tell you what's on your ballot. Ballotpedia is better for that.
Very helpful. Thank you, Debbie. All right. Well, we don't have a huge amount of time left. I know that at least a couple of us do have a meeting starting in exactly 4 minutes. But I did want to make sure to just remind everybody that we do have our action sheet for the month, which Gigi has once again so graciously put together. It's got lots of recommendations of actions you can be taking with your chapter. So Gigi, if you want to give folks a quick orientation to what's in there, I turn it over to you. And then we'll come back to Debbie after we stop recording for that video. And I think Gigi and I will probably drop off for that section.
Sure, yeah, let me just share my screen and I'll just run through it super quick. Oh, okay, there we go. So this really quickly, I'll go through the information to share with volunteers this month. The Write Congress tool now rewards writers with real-time scores for customizing messages to Congress. Now is a good time to think about trusted messengers you'd want at your lobby meetings. Registration for the fall conference has opened October 12th and will last until I believe the day of. Stephanie, you can correct me that if I'm wrong. Energy Permitting Reform Act modeling is out and climate pollution will be reduced even in conservative scenarios if passed. And then finally, CCL's public accomplishments page lists past bill successes and current bills we are working on, which is linked right there for you to check out. This section right here just gives you a sample meeting agenda you can use to kind of build your chapter's own meeting agenda. And then we get into the actions available for this month. So firstly, this month we want to work on the Climate Goat campaign again, specifically the October mini challenge. Being less than a month away from election day, we really need to push in. So we're trying to get 30 climate conversations in 30 days, which is very doable per chapter. If everyone does, like, if 6 volunteers have 5 conversations, that's 30 conversations. It's not that's just 30 more people who would possibly vote. And if you imagine that on a national scale, it can be pretty impactful. So this is a brief description, and then we have possible actions related to this general action that you can take during your meeting listed here, some resources. And then next thing for this month is to focus on other election engagement activities. So this could be like, EVP, like environmental voter project, a tabling event to provide like election season resources, planning on like how you can engage with the GOAT campaign, well, this one's a bit late. The registration deadline is passed, but you can also, instead of maybe making sure your friends are registered, making sure they have a voting plan just by like texting them or having a conversation. And then hosting a ballot research party. There's a short training that can help you, and it'd be good, like Debbie was saying, just to get together and figure out how best to vote in your district. And then registering for CCL's fall conference and begin preparing for Lobby Day. This is a super, super, super important action. Lobby Day is coming up, and if you want your chapter to engage in Lobby Day, a lot of information is included here on how you can get started on that. It's definitely important to register for the fall conference. It'll guide you a lot through how to like talk about policies that will be talked about during Lobby Day, or like we'll lobby for. So everything is here. We don't really have time to go through everything, but I really recommend, if you're looking for a place to start preparing for Lobby Day for your chapter, this is a great place to start. And also, I recently developed a resource to train your chapter volunteers on how to lobby. If you are overwhelmed by all the options on trainings on the CCL website and don't know where to start, I made kind of like a lesson plan for you to, condense those trainings into something more manageable and, share that with your volunteers. So if you are looking for a way to train your volunteers for lobbying, you can ask Stephanie or I for that lesson plan. And then finally, it's just participate in the carbon fee and dividend movement. The information on how you can get involved is all here. And Stephanie shared the action sheet in the chat. So if you're interested in any of those actions and want to learn more, everything is there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gigi, for that quick rundown. There are tons of things to do in there. So please do go check that out. There are so many options, especially around election engagement. And thank you to Gigi for compiling all that. And if you do need to run to our GOAT campaign planning meeting, feel free to drop off while we wrap up, and I'll see you there in a minute.
All right, this is 60 seconds, y'all.
And let me stop the recording before you begin.
Interrupt me if you can't hear.